R. Kelly once said,
"Don't kill me with this."
And literally, the Navy is trying to do good, but there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not requiring the whatever, I'm going to censor myself because this whole entire video is pretty much going to end up on the demonetized, like off the trend. No one's going to see it if you mention any of this stuff for some reason still over a year later. But stay tuned because the Navy might make this the most required and in-demand vaccine that has ever come to light, and probably going to be the most vaccinated out of every single branch in the most effective amount of time, and you might be next. Right now, the CDC has not required the vaccine because it is labeled as an emergent type of vaccine. Now, that is also correlated to the Navy, where they are unable to make this a required vaccine like you've seen with various others, such as flu and other ones like that. But I don't want to always confuse that or correlate that with the flu because they're not exactly the same either. Now, the U.S. Navy is almost as smart as everybody that's going to smash the like button on this video and subscribe maybe, because for some reason when I don't plug it, you guys don't subscribe and you don't like it. But please, I promise you, I'm not as corrupt as the U.S. Navy is right now by trying to coerce you guys very carefully into wanting this vaccine. And that's because they're saying that you could potentially get some great liberty when you pull in a ports on those nice big gray floaty things called ships onto various naval bases. Now, we have to preface this. Does this mean you're going to end up in some of the most remote cool places like Thailand where you get to play ping pong? No, that's not what we're saying. But you will get to enjoy some nice naval installations that could be Sasebo, Japan, Yokosuka, Rota, Spain, Guam, various other military bases specifically. And you're like, oh, those places aren't that bad. But guess what? You're going to be stuck on the base the entire time you're there. So you might as well enjoy a nice little MWR free Wi-Fi, some decent pizza, or maybe some fast food, which is honestly better than being stuck on the ship. But this comes at a price, and that is under the stipulation. Thanks, Navy Times, for reading this entire single message that's come out because it's like 50 pages long. But it's come down to the fact that you are able to port if you have the vaccine and the whole crew is vaccinated. They have also mentioned that they are going to allow certain relaxed standards as you are able to be more relaxed when you're out to sea for so many days. This makes sense because it just makes sense that you're isolated. But what I want to let you guys know is what was very funny about when this first started was that there were ships that had never seen land. When the virus was being spread and they'd never even seen land, there were people being required to wear masks before they even hit the pier. There are true interviews with people wearing masks in this case scenario, and I'm like, no one even came on the ship that was new. How? Why? Why are they wearing masks? But now we're making some common sense of this a year later. Now, the message does note, as many of you guys are going to be concerned with this, that the vaccine does not cure you from ever getting the virus ever in your life, because obviously this strain will mutate along with various other types of viruses that do over years, weeks, months, whatever that timeline is. Now, that does not come with the understanding that they have looked at studies to show that people that do have the vaccine do actually end up having less severe symptoms, which is actually very important for the U.S. Navy and military in general. And from their statistics, it does look like about 2/3 of the units that they have come across, some of these bigger commands, some of the aircraft carriers, it does look about 2/3 of them have become vaccinated. And these are some of the biggest projections of power, which makes sense why they're pushing this even harder and why over the past several weeks we've seen even more of an influence or push, I should say, on Navy HR pages and various others that are showing you, hey, the MCPON got his vaccine. Hey, the Chief of Navy Personnel got his vaccine. The CNO got his vaccine. They're trying to make it look like everyone's getting it. That way it doesn't seem as like not as inclusive for everyone, even the people that are at the top, that are pushing this down to you guys as well. And they do state in this message as well that it's gone through a vigorous or rigorous process. But I would say it's highly debatable amongst a lot of people, because truly has this gone through the whole entire slew of years of testing that we've seen with various other vaccines. And obviously I'm not trying to create speculation. This is not a scientific video where I'm trying to educate you on that. You should go read the CDC if you want to. But if you do look at the process for the FDA to approve these things, you might want to look at that and just have that consideration before you even do this, and not just get your vaccine just because you want a little bit of liberty to go Pizza Via and row to Spain, which actually isn't good. They never answered their phone. I was stationed there. Those Spanish guys get super lazy. You don't get hot wings. You don't get anything you actually order. Like, okay, Spain's great, but off base. Just letting you guys know that. And some fine words from one of the admirals that sent out this message. Vice Admiral Andrew Lewis says, "We cannot make it mandatory yet, but I can tell you we're probably going to make it mandatory as soon as we can, just like the flu vaccine." This has already been annotated or noted in what is called the MERS system, which does document all the vaccines. That's how we knew already that it was being on our hit list. And they were like, do not worry about this. This is not for real yet. It's not required. Don't tell anybody about it, but it's going to be. And we're like, we already knew that. That's because of how much of a risk this is. But let's get into this. So yes, this is not the greatest liberty that you're ever going to see in the U.S. military, hitting the finest U.S. Navy ports like I mentioned previously. But being off that big gray floaty thing can be a nice relaxing break, because obviously they may be big ships, but you don't see how small they can become very fast when you're underway on them every single day, especially destroyers, by the way. Now, looking at this, what I will say as well, obviously you have to consider the families that are stationed on these other bases in Sasebo, Yokosuka, Rota, Guam, all these other places where literally we're going to have to hope most of those people are vaccinated as well. Obviously, there are people that are going to be on these ships that want to go to the local NWR facilities or whatever you call them on the base that you're at. Also, they're going to want to go to the commissary, the Navy Exchange, wherever there is shopping or something to take a break, these people will be there. So we also have to look at the pressure that this is going to create on certain service members, the peer pressure that's going to come on them, and maybe the ridicule that they might get if they choose not to get the vaccine. How are we going to get over that? Now, also on top of that, for a commanding officer to improve the crew morale and everything else, will he possibly say, hey, you don't want the vaccine? Stay home. Might be a reward. But will that mean he pulls somebody else from somewhere else that might be temporary assigned duty on the ship that is vaccinated? Will being vaccinated be a punishment almost at this case? Obviously, big ships are going to be at the mercy of a good chunk of people when you're talking about several thousands of people on one single carrier. Now, that also means that pretty much they're not going to hit a port if you're a big ship. I would say maybe a smaller ship, these submarines, things like that. You might notice you're able to hit a port a little bit easier because there's less crew. You can maybe have more influence and educate those people a little bit faster than what we're seeing on a big ship. Obviously, there is bad propaganda that does get put out there from people that don't believe that vaccines are good. You know, that's already been established, like the past 5 years. And remember that thing where I said being asymptomatic without symptoms is a big thing for the U.S. military? The U.S. military, do they care about COVID? They do, but let's be real. How does it affect the ability to fight in a war situation? Before the vaccine, if you got it, guess what? You could probably end up on a ventilator at some point. Does every U.S. Navy ship have the medical capability to ensure that you're on a ventilator? I'll leave that up to you to answer that question. Now, also looking at it, if you had multiple people, what burden does that create on the crew? Whereas if you are able to mitigate that risk to the smallest amount, and maybe even hopefully have most of you that are at these military bases where they're going to be in port doing that, and they're most likely going to be vaccinated as well, you're really mitigating that risk to a much, much smaller group of people, but there is still a chance. And obviously, if someone comes on that is not vaccinated, that's going to become a big issue. Obviously, government contract workers and things like that will have to be vaccinated almost as an exclusive, like, we want to keep our sanity on this ship unless you absolutely have to be on this ship. To disclose this entire thing, I have received my first vaccine. I'm waiting on my second one to come through. So that's because I do work as a healthcare provider in a healthcare setting where I'm like, I have more chance of getting it than mostly every other person that deals with this on a regular basis, just because I do see so many people that do have symptoms. But I would love to know what you guys think about this and your ideas about getting the vaccination. Is it still too early? Do you think that the military is pushing this maybe a little too fast to try and get back to our normalcy? And is this risk mitigation enough to say that we can relax this a little bit if we want to? But I am looking forward to getting able to go other places, obviously, as we're looking at over a year of this right now. And I've been locked down here in Japan and really haven't been able to go home on leave do anything outside of my local area for the most part, and I know you guys are as well. But as always, if you guys do love what we do on this channel, you can help support us over at patreon.com, which is down the link in the description as well. You can become a patron there and get some special perks. Also, on top of that, we do have a YouTube membership down below. You can click the join button below this video and get some special perks that way as well. But as always, if you guys do have questions, you can always hit me up on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, or down in the comments below. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.